Why, yes, you can cheese this fight, and that's why out of the top 25 players, there's a lot of warriors. Now, you're probably wondering how exactly are they cheesing it, and I'll let you know that in a little bit, but first of all, look how people are going from 1500 to 1900 DPS here. And even out of these guys, the top 5, not all of them are doing the cheese. That means that you're going to see much higher numbers in the next week, and that maybe you can get a big edge if you do this very, very soon. And notice how the warriors are sticking out a little bit more than usual as compared to their raid group. And here we can take a little peek at their gear. Turns out that the equipment you take or the spec you use isn't hugely impactful. All of them actually work for this little trick we're going to talk about. They all have access to the same abilities that enable this cheese. It just has to do with how you organize your raid mostly. Let's check out their damage profiles too, and now you're probably going to start getting a little hint of how this works. You might have noticed that there's a couple people using cleave, but not most of them. Turns out the optimal rotation for this fight doesn't actually have you killing the bosses one at a time always, even though that would have you kill them the fastest. So we're definitely going to be padding on this fight, but let's check out what their raid teams look like. Pretty interesting checking out these kill times already. I can't believe just how close they are, but even if you had a much slower kill time, you'd actually be able to pull some wacky stuff off, because the way that you're going to do a bunch of damage on this fight makes you a little less sensitive to how quickly you kill the boss, because this cheese actually will extend how long the fight is. Now, look at when we overlay all the raid teams, you can see how the warriors stick out a little more than usual. Kind of goofy and stark of a difference compared to the normal raid composition. And there's some other news that I would say is good news. Check out the gear here. Looks like you can kind of get away with any of the DPS specs that aren't two-handed Fury. Really quickly, we'll stack them all up, and you can see we got dual wield Fury, an MS spec, dual wield Fury, Glad Chad, and another dual wield Fury. And if you like using a two-hander, you're going to have even more opportunities to pad and get some extra damage on this fight. I'm kind of thinking that it might become very popular in the next few weeks. And looking at the cast logs, we can see that this is an example of someone not really cheesing much. And this is an example of someone cheesing a lot. Look at that cleave cast amount. Normally there's only one thing you can hit at a time, and this guy has just a few cleaves. He's actually in the same group as the first guy. This person's using Glad Stance, and he's not doing any cheese really. And then the final guy here, he's doing just a little bit of cheese, but not even mostly. Look, he has a lot more heroic strikes than cleaves. But it's a little more important to look at how hard their abilities are hitting than just how many times they're casting it. As you can see here, it's basically all single target for the number 1. When we're looking at the number 2 guy, it's becoming a little less single target. You can get deep wounds on multiple things after all, and we see cleave is the number 3 source of damage there. And then there's a little bit from sweeping strike. Number 3 guy, same deal as the first. There's not really a whole lot of cleave damage here. Number 4 is going to be our Glad Chad, and it's all single target from him, just blasting one guy as hard as he can. And then for the very last guy, yet again, we'll see just a tiny bit of cleaving going on. Really not all that much. More damage from the heroic strike, so they're mostly single targeting, which also, that does make sense, because for most of the fight, there's only going to be one mob up, unless you're cheesing super hard. So let's go and look at some of their rotations in the timeline. You can see from this guy, he's hitting one target, trying to do this the right way. You kill the one that doesn't have the health regens, that's Ogom, and then you get on Jammal'an afterwards. Next guy, cleave, 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 cleave. What's going on? Hey, even though one of the mobs basically can't take damage because they heal 20% a second, that doesn't mean that you can't stack them to pad. You see, Warcraft logs normally counts damage as long as it's done on a creature that has to be killed during the fight, even if you're hitting it before the damage can really be used productively. They might change this in the future. They might have it actually scanned so that way damage done on Jammal'an before Ogom dies doesn't count towards your parse, but I wouldn't be too surprised if they don't do that. And in which case, if you're being a cleavy boy, you're going to get a whole lot more DPS. You just got to make sure you convince your raid team to stack these two guys. It's going to help you out. It could help the rogues out. Some minor cleave from other classes, I guess, but mostly just a way for you to pad for yourself. But hey, I mean, who doesn't like seeing more numbers?